Wrong way. Ah, that's why it's doing that. Okay.
My blood is reactive.
How does it react?
Um, it reacts by burning, apparently.
Ah, most unfortunate.
Well, burning on enemies. But I guess on other things too. That means I need to roll 2 of those. Hive communication. Well, that's gonna be useful.
He's got to wash a lot of parking garage off his face.
You would be surprised. Like I never really like understood how dirty they get. Like even just, just doing the drive rounds that they do to make sure everyone's parked correctly.
Mm,
Like until he's like, check this out one day, and he washed his face and showed me the pad, and I was like, oh,
yeah,
it's like he walked out of a bottle of ink.
it's pretty bad on the lungs too, I'm sure.
Oh yeah, I bet.
When they when first day at TwitchCon, the line went down into the garage and looped around it like twice, and it was just so miserable, hot and muggy down there. I was worried for people's safety. I was like, this isn't good.
All right, I'm back.
Welcome back.
Welcome back.
Okay. So I am got a cold, so we will go for as long as I can manage. I'm feeling okay at the moment, so
Oh no,
I
you
should
got
be good
that
for a bit.
con crud.
No, this is brought home by the kid, like they often are.
Ah,
Actually,
fair.
I don't think I got anything from the con. I wasn't really out in the con. I was behind the table the entire time, and nobody bought anything, so I touched all of three people. There was no con transfer to be done.
Oh,
It's funny because it's sad.
I am surprised.
I'm not terribly. It was the
Okay,
wrong con for this product.
fair enough.
It's very much a fan driven convention. So people are much more
Ah, that
interested
makes
in
sense.
getting buttons of their favorite Pokemon or, cute anime tits than they are investing in a new IP they've never heard of. It's also a very travel heavy con, which I had sort of forgotten to take into account. But the vast majority of people who were there were not local, so they weren't looking to bring back 2 books or to spend
Oh,
$60 on a single product when they wanted to spend $3 at 20 different places. That math doesn't add up, but
well, I mean, just because they're looking to do it doesn't mean that they can.
it's true.
Or that is
I
to
did.
say, just because they can't do it doesn't mean they're not trying.
I got a couple, of which one is watching right now, which is nice. Hopefully they will have a good time as I attempt to work through my muddled brainness here on this thing. We are also down Nick. We will probably need to start looking for additional players at some point because I suspect that's going to happen a bunch. Usually it seems like he's at the end of his day when we start this, so it may be hard to keep a story going if he keeps disappearing. But if it's a one-time thing, then we don't really have to worry about it. We will assume that he's there in background.
mhm.
Okay, so people got characters then?
Sure do.
What are these characters you speak of?
Well, I made a Passum.
Nice.
She is very good at piloting and the doing the engineering.
Mm-hmm.
And she's not 100% sure where she's from
Seems like a fairly awesome
because
posse.
I have a.
Eh.
Thank you very much. I have the background that is called on page 1.
You've got your roll 20 thing
Dubious
turned on, I
origin.
think. You're getting double.
Oh, my bad. Okay, there we go.
Yeah, there you
Oh,
I still got a double.
go. I don't hear it on my end.
Okay, it stopped.
Hmm.
Okay, there we go.
at least in part, that was me again. I don't know why it keeps doing that. It never does it in my own channel.
Eh,
I don't know. So yeah, I don't. I've spent most of my time working on spaceships.
okay.
In whatever odd jobs I can get. What with having no particular traceable background, and my training degrees being possibly dubious. So
Okay.
my name, by the way, is Aim Asteroth.
Nice. Known to her friends as Awesome Possum. There will be some slight tweaks in background as we kind of reveal the setting a little bit, because I had this epiphany of kind of a fun setup, but it does require a little bit of working, so we'll work it out together.
Works fine for me. Like I said, my background is purposefully not set in stone so that it can be customizable.
Cool.
That's why it's so bare bones.
John, what do you got? What do you got?
I am playing a maglev cog
Okay.
named Seal. He was specially built to be a bodyguard for a mob boss, actually. But he finds the boss a little bit too. I don't know how to put it. I guess just a little too unsavory. He also finds the job very boring. It mostly feels like babysitting to him, like it's not what he was built for, despite being explicitly what he was built for. If that makes any sense, it's a bit of that cog disconnect. Like he knows what he should be doing, and he feels that he's not being utilized to his fullest ability. Um, and he is huge. He is a very big boy. Built to look like a maned wolf, so he is just mostly leg.
The tallest.
Oh yeah, basically.
Okie dokie. Then Tygon.
I am playing Kikira, who is an exonymph.
Cool.
Nice.
Who is the basic background I had in mind, but I'm perfectly fine with adjusting it. That she, appeared as exonymous do. No, it's just I I don't have anything meant where exactly she came from, but she was before she became properly self-aware and anything. So before she ate somebody the first time, uh, she was basically tracked down by a group of exonymphs, and they sent somebody to get her. And but something went wrong, and they probably got attacked. And the one who was sent to get her was mortally wounded. So he let he or her I don't know let her eat their brain.
Okay.
And the at least that was my idea, is that she got all sorts of abilities out of that, obviously, but not the knowledge where this group is actually hiding.
Mhm.
So she is kind of on her own. But like I said, doesn't have to be like that. Though. It's just an idea.
Well, we will modify all of them to work. I think they can all be functional in what we have in mind here. So here's the
Okay.
concept. This is the overall rundown. There is a company called Exodus that had this grandiose idea to create a generation ship that was going to travel outside the solar system toward the nearest exoplanet and establish the first supersolar vector colony. Because that's a thing that occasionally people do. Now, I say occasionally because it's a little bit like grailing. It's the idea that you're going to go off and do something amazing that has honestly dubious awards. There's no guarantee that there's anything particularly useful out there. There's no commerce beyond yourself because everybody else is making plenty of money in the solar system and they don't really have a need to go trading out there. It's not like you're getting a resource they don't already have. They're not really running out of air. They've gotten agriculture pretty much figured out. Um, the setting is not starved for any particular resource, so a lot of the drive to go traveling outward, at least from the large corps, who are kind of required to fund things like this, is pretty minimal beyond just sort of being a publicity stunt. And there are frankly cheaper publicity stunts to be had. Exodus was a very well-to-do company. It was not Marsco well-to-do, but it was big. And when they decided that they wanted to do this, they were shipbuilders. And when they decided that they wanted to do this, it was kind of their very long-term PR stunt, but it was also sort of projected as a labor of love. This happened roughly 60, 70 years ago by current timelines. And a lot of why are you going through this process kind of came back with because we can and it's time to because nobody's done it yet, at least not to this scale. And what they produced was the Exodus Prime, which was this giant generation ship intended to hold multiple generations of people for what they projected it being somewhere along the lines of a 160-year journey, give or take, depending on how technology advanced. They had an expectation that at some point or another somebody was going to come with a light speed and catch up to them. But in the event that it didn't happen, they had everything that they needed to make the trek. The trek had kind of a large span to it. It might be 160. Somewhere within the first 80 or so, they were supposed to figure out whether or not their destination was actually feasible, and then there were a couple sub-destinations that they could take off to, which might increase the journey. But the bottom line was whoever was going on this boat wasn't coming back. So it didn't really matter how long the journey was because the ship was intended to be able to make it. It was a giant floating colony of pretty considerable size and substantial armament, which raised a lot of eyebrows. But their defense was, for the first 10 years or so of this trip, there's going to be an awful lot of civilians inside of reachable space on a very expensive piece of technology. So they needed the ability to defend it should somebody decide to gang up on them. So that was a thing, and they gathered up about 6,000 able souls to put onto their ship, which was the majority of their company at the time. Sorry. As well as volunteers and folks that they deemed, be good assets and had passed certain psychological profiles, and loaded them on board, and to great fanfare, took off toward the stars. To which a lot of people said, "You're silly. Why are you doing this? Good riddance." But others, it had a little bit of a space race to it. It was sort of like this is a nice thing that seems wholesome. They're going off to do something kind of neat. This is going to set some history books if it actually succeeds. They'll let us know, and maybe none of us will live long enough to see it, but in the future this may prove itself as possible. Either that, or we just send 6,000 people to die, which was entirely possible too. As I had mentioned before, the generational ship had been attempted, just not to this scale, and so far, no dice. some had to turn back. There were some that were out for about 10 years and returned because they were just having too many problems. More than one over the course of all of vector history had simply disappeared. But this was a big one and had a lot of very modern technology in it, and it was presumed that it would be able to keep track of itself fairly well. About 15 years into the journey, or not 15 rather, it was about 6 months or so into the journey, Exodus kind of declared that the route that they were on was a false route on purpose, so that they could make a course correction here at about 6 to 8 months in, and not broadcast the course correction so they could stop being harassed on their way out. Because there had been a whole lot of they were burning energy. People were catching up with them. They were having to use weapons to keep people off to the sides. It's just, some were just wanted to watch. Others were using air vents. It was kind of just a whole lot of, it's like trying to find Tesla's car. It's like, oh, look, there's the big, floating boat. Let's go harass it for a little bit before it gets on behind the astral belt. So they said, we're making a final course correction. Yep, it's been made. I lied. It happened a week ago. If you weren't directly watching it, you now don't know where it is. And they basically cloaked it by having it do a long burn and a turn, and floated it out. And unless people were directly paying attention, it was kind of hard to spot at that point. So it fell to obscurity, and it's been about 60 years or so. Unless you were actually actively paying attention to it at the time, most people in Seoul don't even know it exists. It's still a thing you can look up. The company still exists, but it is off on its long and lonely haul into the stars. You are members on board this ship. You're the second generation of the populace. How old was everybody?
That was not something I considered.
Yeah, same here, actually.
I was thinking like mid-20s, like action movie age.
Okay.
That works.
I see Nick joined us.
Is Nick back?
I'm just listening.
Oh, okay.
Oh, you can do that on Twitch, You don't have to leave. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying if that's your inclination.
I like. I
Big
don't
butts,
count.
and you cannot lie.
Well, yes, I won't lie about that, but
It is Kinktober.
We've established that.
Sorry I brought it up.
Oh, not yet.
Phrasing.
Not remotely.
Soon.
yeah, I'm just listening. So
So yeah, that might actually put you on third generation. I'm trying to decide when the most likely time. So assuming everybody who got on board the ship initially was somewhere in somewhere between like the 20 to 40 range. I mean, you're gonna have older and younger, give or take. Some may have had children rather early on, which would take them out another 20, 30 years, 60. Yeah, you could be third generation. So there's been two. You were born and raised on this ship. Your parents were probably born and raised on this ship. Your grandparents likely at some point lived in Seoul. The ship, so that you're aware of it, is a very large structure, and it was designed specifically for this task. It wasn't retrofit, so it has a lot of kind of atypical behaviors to it. A big one being that they wanted to make sure that they had removed every conceivable hull weakness. So they got rid of a lot of the stuff that a lot of other ships have, like windows or seams that would allow it to be retrofitted on the fly without having to replace its chassis. A lot of the other ships have disconnect points where they can be like, okay, we're going to upgrade your engines without changing the rest of you. Then they wanted everything to be hard locked, built in, easy to repair, and no points of failure. So there's maybe 2 windows on the ship, and they're on the bridge. Everything else is done digitally. It was also decided by whoever was in charge of general morale that perhaps staring out into the void of space for the next 100 years might be demoralizing. So they, have lovely images of trees and sunlight so that people can recall that that's a thing that they may someday see and be going for. It is actually damned difficult to get a look outside, and by difficult I mean nobody's done it unless they are actually in the command staff. There's maybe a window up top. For most of you, your world is the interior of this vessel. It's pretty big. It's like a city block. So as far as adjustments to people's characters go, for the cog, you can there can still be a gang leader and stuff here. This place has two generations of society in it. It's the same kind of commerce build as Sol is, although the megacorps aren't inside of it so much. But there could be people manufacturing their stuff using their own scratch built printers. So things that you're not allowed to buy on the ship or not allowed to produce on the ship, there could be an underground for it that you could be
Okay.
working for or guarding for somebody for. And they may have recruited you and or retrofitted you into that particular family, maybe because you were born near it or because you showed a certain penchant for punching people in the face.
Yeah.
As the case may be. Chances are most of your modifications are aftermarket. That's typically something that COG Society would frown on, but you're kind of in a microcosm here. So around this place, you kind of work with what you've got, and if people have a way to get you more, that makes them very powerful. So somebody had a way to get you a larger frame or unique abilities, that is a sign of something powerful. For Fox, you, if you would like, to go along with the dubious origin thing, could be an unaccounted for child. It's a group of about 6,000 people where the start. You're now 3 generations in, so the population has increased somewhat. Every person is supposed to be tagged and accounted for, but it is entirely possible on the initial count there was a plus or minus based on stowaways or even tricks. Somebody was pregnant who didn't declare it, or a test tube baby. Any number of different things that could have come through. So there are the odd one or two members of the populace that just aren't properly tagged.
Or even possible that she was made by the company or a sub company that's like a conspiracy that has come up in the meantime.
That's certainly something that the people would suggest as possible. Yeah, now they vehemently deny this. But it is a big ship, and most people don't have access to all of it. In fact, there's a pretty big chunk of it that nobody has access to, mostly for just outright fear. So a lot of the engine room areas, you can, when you can get your careers and stuff, you can work on maintaining the ship, but there are certain parts of it that are basically roped off, and it's like the components behind this door are designed to never expire. They should be functional for the next 1,000 years. Don't open this. If it breaks, you can't replace it, and you're all going to die. And that's kind of the. There's a few parts of the ship that are tagged with these kind of signs that are just sort of avoided because whatever is back there is really just designed to keep working. And if it doesn't work, you're in a lot of shit. There's probably a way to repair it, but it is safer to leave it be until it starts making weird noises.
I'll tell you what I think's back there. Humans.
Answers.
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 See what happened. The last humans were put. This whole thing is a front to send the last humans to a safe place in a far galaxy.
Oh man, that's a much better plot than I was thinking of. Fuck. Hang on, let me change it. Yeah, so there's a few spots like that, and that big chunks of the ship are sort of roped off. There's also the parts of the ship that you're just not supposed to be around, but people do get into, and that's usually where these closet sales go through, and the areas where some of the more ne'er-do-well characters would peddle their wares, unless they've kind of bought officiality. There is a makeshift government on board, which is basically the hierarchy sent forward from Exodus, which is determined back home, because you're still in communication range. It takes a couple days to get a signal back and forth, but it's not far out. but they determine based on rank and ability who's getting what job. But there's also this gray area of if you need a replacement for X or if you need somebody to handle Y, figure it out amongst yourselves. And in that gray area, you have the internal politic, where people have been, brought into certain positions either because they've granted certain favors or, in some cases because they're actually good at it. That sort of deal. What are you all doing, do you think, on a standard day? Tygon, we're gonna get to you. You're actually gonna pop in from another scene. I have an in
Okay.
for you. So on a usual day, Fox, what do you think you're up to?
Um, I think that I am collecting small parts. Is uh in a storage airlock that I rent. I am building a small personal shuttle in case I ever get to fly outside the ship.
Okay, that's kind of
It,
a
it,
passion
it's kind
project.
of it's kind of a fool's errand sort of situation that everybody makes fun of me for.
When you first
But
started on this process, it was a thing that was giggled at. When you got a little further onto it, how far along do you think you are currently? Like, how long has this been worked on?
it's something I've probably been working on for. I'm gonna say I've been working on it since I was a teenager,
Okay.
and it's not amazingly far along because I mean we're talking about a space worthy vehicle, and that's a lot of parts, and I'm getting that like, oh hey, now I have windshield wipers
Mm-hmm.
kind of thing. Like, oh, I have a piece of the steering now.
This is a combination of like Tim Allen's hot rod from Improvement and the spaceship they made in Battlestar Galactica in the corner.
Yeah, pretty much.
When you started this project, yes, it got a few giggles, much like the Galactica craft. But as it did kind of make some progress, more people got a little interested in it. So various folks have kind of helped to assist, of which John's character can be one if he so wishes. Also, when you guys get the chance, can you change your character names on your Roll20 just so I can like learn them better on the portrait tabs because I don't know
Oh,
them.
sure.
Yeah, but a few people got more into it. It became oddly difficult to find specifics for a lot of the needs you would have to have a single person space worthy craft when you were kind of getting deeper into it. Originally, all this stuff was just kind of pretty easy to find, and you were able to get a lot of information and diagrams and stuff of the things that you would need, pressures you would need to endure, various thrust specs. It was all kind of present, almost overwhelmingly so. But it almost kind of seemed like as you were getting down to the end of it that it was harder and harder to find the stuff. And over the course of the past year or so, you have had increased scrutiny on your building. Like people have been, kind of cautioning you against squandering station resources on your pet project, or you need to not be putting this together. There's stuff there that might be important for if our ship ever gets damaged. So it's been a little bit touchy lately as it's kind of getting closer to being done. All right, Kale, what about you?
Um, well, there's certainly one of the quirks I took, and this is why I kept making Dancer of the Boreal Valley jokes, is he is actually spends part of his days entertaining his owner with dance, specifically ballet. Um, the gigantic mag legs are really good for that.
Not the
Um,
dance I expected.
well, there's stuff. I've got head cannons that probably aren't for streaming.
Actually, if you have cannons in his head, you had to buy those in surgery.
That's a very good point. Um, And so he'll do that. He'll probably get sent on like small enforcement missions around the ship, collecting parts, collecting money from people who promised them, etc.
So it's possible you've encountered this other person before, even perhaps likely, though not necessary if you guys wanted to have separate beginnings.
I'm fine with that if he is.
Do you have a preference, Fox? If you wanted to like have previous dealings with Leggy Boy, you're muted.
I can't believe he's dead.
Oh no,
Rip.
gone forever. Oh, he is dead. He just left.
He might be having connection issues. Our internet at the house is real
There
bad.
we go.
There you are.
I don't know what happened. It wasn't even my internet
Weird.
because I was trying to reconnect on my phone. Oh wait, my phone's on my Wi-Fi right now.
Well, there you go.
It was your internet
Yeah, it might have been my internet. But
all
I mean,
along.
like I was able to connect to Roll20, but
So, do you have
yeah.
a preference of whether or not you have a previous relationship with Kale here?
No, that'd be cool.
Alright. So the other question is whether or not it's positive, or if encountering has usually been like the first person to grab this part lying in the middle of the floor is the winner.
I think I'm everybody's buddy.
Uh,
Like
Kale,
even
do you,
people who just like really don't like me because I'm everybody's buddy.
Kale, do you hang out with this nerd?
Yeah, I'll hang
He
out with
makes
this
like
nerd.
spaceships inside of spaceships.
I want to escape someday, so I'll definitely hang out with him.
Well, there it is.
That is a kind of common fantasy. In fact, there are many a forbidden novel kind of about escaping the ship. You are often reminded though that there is no escape. You're 60 years out into the void.
Oh yeah.
Even if hopped into a spacesuit and shot away to the great beyond, you just die out there. So the most common videos and sanctioned movies and stuff that are shown are the joy of pushing toward arrival, which is a joy that you are all very aware that you will never see. You are in the middle of this journey. There is no arrival. There is no leaving. This is it. This is your world. Nobody ever thinks about the middle generations on these generation ships. You're in the shitty one. In fact, you will not be all that significantly closer within the next, prime of your life. Perhaps as you get toward death, you will be some 20 years out from destination or so, but that'll be it. However, today things are a little bit different. So as of late, during your day-to-day tasks, you have been kind of noticing the presence of occasional officials of Exodus uh, that are not always as noticeable as they have been. It's wearing a different uniform, and they're just doing the usual thing. They look around, they check on equipment, they make sure the populace is okay. These are people, of course, who grew up here. You may have known some of them before they got jobs with Exodus. It's kind of a treat to get a job with Exodus. Everybody kind of has a a subsidized living because they don't want everybody dying on their ship. It can't become a big home for corpses. So in a way, everybody's kind of an Exodus employee, but to actually be wearing the badge is kind of a smaller amount because most of the time the colony is just the colony, and the badge is significant because it gives them sort of this god power. They can make certain decisions about the actual environment itself. If they decide that it needs to be rainy today, then so be it. And you have noticed one in and about here and there, watching over the past couple months. This was somebody who may drop that line to you saying, be cautious about abuse of ship resources. Things can sneak up on you. And John, you're kind of concerned that maybe some of the more nefarious tasks you've been sent on may have filtered upward. So he's kind of making you all a bit paranoid. But at the moment, you don't really know what his deal is, except that this morning he knocked on your door. So beginning with Fox, there is a knock on your dwelling, and outside of it, your dwelling, by the way, is kind of Fifth
Right.
Element-esque apartment, wherein you
I
live in about a 6 by 10 area where everything folds away.
I was initially picturing like one of those Japanese hotels that's like a coffin with some shelves.
The bed is everything. Yeah, actually, I mean, it is quote comfortable. It's comfortable in the same sense of that Fifth Element apartment where you're living in a hallway and everything kind of tucks into the sides, but it's a spot you could sit there perhaps with another person. It has a shower. That is also the toilet. I mean, you gotta work with what you got.
Do they do a shower? I figured they do some kind of, what do you call it? Uh, Flow form situation.
Yeah, I mean that's what the shower is.
Oh, okay.
It's just kind of like it goes up as well as down. It's very exciting.
Jeez.
Marvelous.
Up,
The
up, down,
future.
up, down, left, right,
Yeah,
any way you need it
that's pretty
to.
good. I mean, in the really cool ones, it just like does eye tracking, so you can like make it dance and have it swish around and shit like that. Like
When you got to get to those hard to reach places.
yours has two settings. There's a toggle on the wall. One is for down water, the other is for up water. You can just you begin with the down, you finish with the up, and then you're good to go.
Do not mistake them.
Yes.
I I I am hanging from fittings on my ceiling, and I just kind of slowly rotate to the door and push the button because it's tiny space. I don't really need to go anywhere.
Fair enough.
I'm just kind
Yeah.
of hanging there upside down, working on something.
Right. He clears his throat and says, "Hey, Masterov,
Like, yep.
your presence is requested on the bridge." That phrase is not a thing that you have heard in your lifetime spoken to anyone. The bridge is not a place people go. The bridge is like there is a specific command staff that goes to the bridge, and they might occasionally speak to you via the feeds or a balcony. It is not a place that you like go up and travel to.
Um, w- the the I'm sorry, the ridge. Is that a
He makes a B shape with his mouth and then crooks a finger and then looks back and says, "But clean up first. I'll meet you at the elevator." The elevator is one elevator amongst 500 elevators, but there's only one elevator that is called the elevator. And it's a main corridor elevator that actually takes you between the major core systems of the ship, including bridge area and engineering. It is most often used for crews that are traveling toward the engineering sections. Rarely does it really go up.
um the bridge though? The actual bridge?
The actual
Take
one,
me to the actual bridge.
he says, as he's already starting to depart. He's kind of walking his way down the hallway, and he's just like, "Yup."
I'm gonna close the door, and I'm gonna send a mass email to all my friends. That's just like company company people have asked me to go to the bridge. I don't know if that means I'll disappear.
It is somewhat late in the evening, so you weren't really expecting immediate replies, but the fact that you don't get any make you all the more nervous.
I will take a shower and dress in. I like to think like I've got a sample picture there. I like to think my character. I want people to imagine my character's style of dress. I'm trying to put a word to it. I'm gonna go with Jim and the holograms.
Fair enough. It's good.
So that kind of
It's going to become even more appropriate here by the end of this.
excellent.
Hint,
All
hint,
right, so
foreshadow.
I'll go. Prepare to get into a fight with the misfits. Then I guess
Fair enough. Good.
I'll head. I'll get dressed and head to the bridge.
Can your scarf be made of that like crazy hologram sticker material? You know, the ones
Can it?
that are just yeah, just like that's what the scarf is made out of, is that bright
Please.
white to polychromatic hologram reflective material that's on like stickers for kids.
Yes, and also if you hold down a certain part of it, it goes rigid like and becomes a giant slap bracelet.
Fair enough. I
There we
like
go.
it. You just
That's
have to be
yes.
careful about it because it will either uncoil itself violently from your neck or kill you. There's really only two options.
I'm willing to live with this.
Well, up until a
I
certain
will take
point.
this. I will take this risk upon myself.
Fair enough. Okay, so you get dressed in your best Lisa Frank stickers, and we'll proceed downward to the hall. Kale, you likewise get a visitation by the same person, who confirms your name and says that your presence is requested on the bridge.
The the bridge of the ship.
The bridge of the ship. The very same.
All right. I guess I'll come then, and I'll head with them to the bridge.
As you he tells you likewise to kind of clean up a bit before he goes, and you get a message from the person for whom you work who needs a name. I call him Darren. I don't know why that jumped to my head, but sure, why not? Darren sends you this message, telling you where you're supposed to meet up for, because you usually meet him someplace to kind of commence operations.
Yeah.
Does not seem to have any particular prior awareness of where you are currently supposed to be going. Um, your biggest suspicion at the moment is something's been caught.
Yeah. You know what? I'm not gonna tell him where I'm going. I'm just gonna be like, okay, and kind of like ignore the message.
Okay. He gets grumpy when you do that, but I mean, it is what it is. He doesn't like it when people don't return his calls. You will meet up with AIM at the elevator, which surprises you to see him there because you're aware of him, and the two of you have existed in each other's company on more than one occasion, but you're not really sure why he's there now because you're not even really sure why you're here now. And he is present. Sorry, I was about to say what he did, but you can actually do that yourself.
Um,
Kale is coming down toward you.
AIM is just kind of standing around nervously, probably just pacing a little bit.
He'll look kind of relieved. He's like, oh, well, I guess I can't be in too much trouble then.
It's like,
There's two options here. Either I'm not in too much trouble, or AIM's up to some weird shit.
Yeah, exactly.
it's like, hey, what's up?
Got a call.
They may be disappearing me. So remember me.
Well, I'm going to the bridge.
Tell my
So
oh,
if they're disappearing you, they're gonna disappear me too.
yeah, that's not gonna help people tell my story.
No, it will not. But I mean, if they're calling you to the bridge, it's likely not what I was expecting. So we're probably safe. Probably.
At about that time, the elevator itself will open up, and the guy that has called you both to it will be standing there inside of it. It's kind of a messy floor. This is often used again to go to the engineering levels of the station, which you've actually been to before, just not by means of the main lift. This one is usually only used for traveling or using very large equipment that isn't really accessible to people who are not part of the corporation. But it's empty currently, except for the two of you. And he waves you in and waits.
I'll step inside.
I'll walk in.
The elevator will
Trying.
close behind you with a heavy and somewhat foreboding thunk, and begin to rise, taking you upward throughout the ship's levels. He's not inherently, not initially chatty when you see him. He's just kind of seems to be looking you both over, and he reaches into his coat in a oh god, this is it. We just die here. They'll mop up the blood later. He pulls out a bar and proceeds to eat it. Says, "Sorry, I had a late breakfast. You're hungry?" And holds out a bar.
I slowly shake my head back and forth. No.
No, thank you.
And then over to the side. It's pretty good. Um, there's time for him to actually finish it. The tension remains high throughout the entire process of consuming the bar as the elevator does not stop moving, which you kind of figure the ship is bigger than you sort of thought it was. You've gotten higher than you were at earlier points. Um, and when it stops inside it stops and opens, and there's a hallway on the other side with different decor than they're really familiar with seeing. You recognize the colors. It's the corpse colors. But the footprints on the ground doesn't seem as worn. It hasn't been walked over as much. The carpentry is the carpentry. The carpeting is new. Um, Looks fresher. Like not a whole lot of people use it. On the other side of this hallway is another elevator, and he points down toward that one and says, "We don't usually use the big one to go all the way up to the top. There's a few stops." And he gives you a little wink.
Okay.
I'm very nervous.
Yeah, Chaos is like, this is very unusual.
This elevator has gold trim.
That's cool.
Fancy.
It opens as he approaches it, and you guys can walk in.
I'll enter.
He does not follow you. The door will close once you enter, and he kind of gives you a little wave, and it closes, and it's the two of you in the elevator, and it begins to rise.
I don't like this.
Mm-mm. No, I haven't liked any of this from the beginning. But I'm also nervously excited. Maybe we'll get to see the bridge before they kill us.
I'm not entirely convinced they're gonna kill us. Not entirely.
Ding! It will arrive at the top, or what you hope is the top, and open up. And there's another hallway which leads out into kind of a fanned area with stairs leading upward, and you can hear noises coming from the end of it.
I'm gonna wait for Kale to head that way, and
Yeah, I'll go first.
I will follow in Kale's mighty shadow.
Okay. So you are marveled at the level of leg that is present in this person, but you travel forward, and you emerge after coming up a few levels into a massive bridge area. And it's very just spacious and kind of gorgeously laid out. With multiple stations. The stations aren't seated stations because really this ship is intended to go in one direction and not be fucked with. So like there's no reason to have somebody sitting at a station for long purposes. But there are all sorts of different platforms that have different sensors, different scanners on them that people are kind of circling to. There's maybe 3 people up here, one of whom you recognize as the current captain. And the current captain is this kind of regal-looking, mustached fellow. Is gonna be a terrier, I think. Uh, that no, what's the who's the? Oh, he's a Scotty. Is that too cliche? Can I do
No, I
that?
love it.
All
I
right,
love it.
I guess you
Yeah.
can do that. Sure, why
Uh,
not? I guess we can do
or you could always go with a captain that's a gray tabby who's very fond of reading.
I'm gonna pick the Scotty one just because it's a pun on multiple levels. But thank you for your runner-up. Uh,
Oh, you read more.
and he turns this big guy. Has a large and impressive coat on. He turns to face you. There is a third person that is with you. Nick's character was in on this thing, so we're kind of hand waving him for the moment, but like he was present on this. So all 3 of you were in the elevator kind of deal. But he looks at you and nods and says, "You've made it. Welcome to the bridge." The bridge, by the way, does not have a view to the outside either. It is primarily a large
I'm
open-topped
a,
area.
a little disappointed.
Yeah, there are sweeps that appear to be all over the place, scanning things. It's hard to really figure out what the screens are doing because most of it is numerical depiction. But like you can get the idea that they are actively looking around outside. And there are depictions of ship status and all kinds of things going on that you just don't often see on other consoles. There's technology in here that you have not gotten a chance to play with, that you really wish you could have for your own ship. Like, for instance, that thing over there that tells you whether or not you're going to run into something. That seems important. You kind of get this pang in your gut, like maybe I wasn't supposed to steal stuff because apparently they're using it up here. But that he doesn't seem particularly glowery at you. This is not a person that's completely unheard of. The captain is also kind of the morale center of the crew. So he's seen. He makes announcements to the ship. This is a face you know, but you've never talked to him directly. He's not come over and like mingled with the populace all that often. So this is the first time you've met him himself. And his name shall be. Oh God, what's wrong with my brain? I just said Barkley and Bartholomew. We're not doing any of those. That's not going to happen. That's stupid. Stop me before that happens.
Bob Barker.
uh,
I'm just gonna take a moment to say I'm gonna go to bed. So
ta-ta.
enjoy your game, guys.
Right, Nick.
Good night, sir. Um. Okay, so if he's not, he doesn't seem to be, upset with us in any way, yet. But also, I am definitely immediately just magnetically attached to something that I'm probably not supposed to be messing with, just because I've never had the opportunity to see it before. Just like, oh my gosh, it's one of these, and then immediately moving on to something else, like, oh, and it's one of these.
Oh man, I
And,
use a
and
separate browser just to avoid doing that too. Oh, at
hmm?
least there's nothing horrible in this browser. Sam was saying that the browser showed up on the screen. Declan is the name that I'm gonna pick for it on account of the internet told me so.
Is
A good name.
because he spends a lot of his time hanging out on the deck.
Yes. No, he doesn't. Stop. Anyway, Captain Declan clears his throat at you as you begin poking around with something that is undoubtedly very expensive.
I just gotta look up, just like, I don't have one of these.
he nods and says, "For good reason. We don't have very many of them."
I could learn how to make more.
He looks at you for a moment, and you catch the smallest hint of a smile. And it's kind of, go ahead and do a community perceived difficulty 2.
Okay. I probably should have had my character sheet open so I'd know what that is. Community perceive, you say?
Mhm.
That's a communication check, right?
No, community perceive is just the perception.
Oh,
So, yeah.
duh. Okay. Div 2?
Difficulty 2. Yeah. Cool.
Yeah, that's quite good.
You see this little smile, and at first you think he might be like amused, because I mean, you had a quip ish. But it feels like there might be something more to it. Like there's a trait there that he was actually looking for and saw confirmed. And he kind of quirks his hand and brings you all into an adjacent room. Probably the captain's ready room or what amounts to it. Actually, it'll be more like a meeting room, so it'll be like set 3 on the Enterprise, where you've got the big table and stuff. That comes through, and he gestures to the chairs and says, "If you don't mind having a seat."
I'll take a seat.
I will do so also.
He
I spin
clears
the
his
chair
throat
around and
really quick and says, "What you're about to see will be a little alarming. It will be explained in a moment. Don't worry about it." Or it's more of a, don't panic. You're not in any particular danger. And he taps his watch for a second, and another door opens up nearby. And Tygon, the door in front of you opens where you had been waiting, which was sort of like an elevator sort of holding zone. It was like a wait here until you're ushered in sort of thing. And inside the room, you can see a cog and a vector seated, looking at you, rather surprised, and the captain, who you do actually know. You've talked to him a few times.
Okay. Gonna step into the room and
He waves you over and says, "Kale, aim. This is Kikira. Kikira, Kale, aim."
Nice to meet you.
The creature that you're looking at, how's she dressed, by the way?
Probably functional clothing.
Mm.
I imagine.
Real functional or anime functional? How many belt loops and zippers exactly?
As tempting as it is, let's go with real functional.
Yeah. So she comes in. She is a definitely a strange duck. There is a
I thought she was an exonymph.
Indeed. This is not a shape that you are at all particularly familiar with. The ship does have a storage supply of nymphs for when they land, but they're all in like egg form. It doesn't really need them. It doesn't have a agricultural ecosystem, so there aren't any on the ship. And as the 3rd generation in, you never really encountered a bug before. So this is a whole different like motif. It doesn't even really relate to most of the cinema or games that you've played, other than perhaps a vague rendition of like a big dragony thing. But it's a very alien-looking look. In fact, that's probably your first jump. Like, my God, we've encountered aliens on our trip. This is it.
I just kind of like sit up in my chair and kind of grab the, like gripping the armrests. There's like her like ears going straight up, just like, there is a way out. I also like to. I'm picturing, um, Tygon's character walking in and seated at the table is the most intimidating and the most and least dangerous looking people on the ship.
Right?
John, what do you do?
He's just gonna kind of like stare, because he's never seen anything like this, and he's just kind of floored. And he's gonna be like, "Hi," like not even sure if like it speaks the same language or anything.
Seems to, as Tygon replies. Declan will gesture to another chair on the other side of the table for you.
Yeah, I'm just gonna say hello. It's nice to meet you too, and sit.
The chair that he's sitting in, or that the character is sitting in, um, is kind of specific. It's not like it was labeled, but it's shaped differently in that it accommodates this particular body type rather well. All of the kind of vector chairs are sort of intended to handle a tail of a pretty thick size in case like an alligator sits down or anything like that. But Exonymph have various protrusions. They've got kind of spikes around their backs and their tails are pretty thick with a taper. And this chair appears to have been manufactured with that anatomy in mind. So it occurs to you that not only is there a visitor, there's probably been several, or maybe several over the course of some time now. Declan looks at all three of you, mostly at the two vectors, because part of the spiel Tygon's character is already kind of aware of, but we'll find out as we're explaining it to both of you. He says, "What do you know about this mission?"
Honestly, nothing.
Mission?
Our destination, where the Exodus 2 is going, the Exodus Prime is going.
Oh, we're going to another planet.
As you mention it, he brings up a image which is very familiar. You've seen it over and over again since you were a kid. It's like a pre-generated render of the overall flight path, indicating that you left Mars and did a course change about 5 months in and headed off toward the stars, and where your current position is, which is depressingly far from the center line. You're not going to hit middle for another 20 years or so, maybe longer. And that's when about you're supposed to determine whether or not the destination is actually worth heading to, or whether or not you need to adjust again. And he nods and says, "Yeah, this is where our flight path, according to all of the official documents and representations, says that we're traveling." What was the goal? He asks, kind of curiously, looking around you.
I don't know. I was built, for this. Like just shortly before this for my owner. So I'm really I don't know. I don't know what the mission is. I just know that I'm here and we're going somewhere.
Are you playing a robot, or cogs are born?
Oh, I thought they were. I was reading on them a lot last night, and everything was like they're built like I don't know. I guess I just missed that.
They have like a core that's actually them that is like born, and
Yeah,
everything around them is their own.
they get
Okay.
chassis upgrades, which
Well,
are
I knew
manufactured
that.
different ways. But the initial one is born of parents. Yeah.
I didn't actually. I guess I must have missed that, which is very possible. I was making my character at like 3 in the morning, so I
That'll
was
do
very tired.
it.
I was like, well, I was, born. Okay, let me fix that. Rewind. We're gonna fix
Fair
this.
enough. Yeah, they have standard lifespans too, so you would be,
This is
some 20 years
yeah,
old.
yeah. This is my first time playing a cog, so in either iteration of the game, first edition or second. Um, I was born here, and we were already traveling, so I figured we were just traveling.
He nods a little bit and says there have been some debate amongst the educational centers about whether or not your generation should really be told too much about what's going on. regarding this mission, mostly to keep you from feeling quite so stifled by your surroundings. According to this path, you won't be arriving any place concrete within your lifespan. I'm
Ah,
somewhat familiar with the feeling as early second generation. I was born when we were only about 10 years away from Earth, or from Mars where they launched, and could have conceivably turned back. And according to this path, will not be arriving any place within my lifespan either. He kind of waves the screen off to the side and says, "Do you have a particular desire to stay on board this ship?"
Um, I mean, this is where I live, so I mean, what else is there?
He nods and says, "I'm not speaking as though I'm going to throw you out of an airlock or anything like that. I just
Well,
mean."
no, I would die.
He grins and says, "I mean in general, you have been reported as developing a personal craft." He brings up what is a almost depressingly high resolution image of it, meaning that at some point somebody was in there taking very good pictures and you weren't really aware of it.
Well, I have no. I don't have any. What's the word I'm looking for? Illusions about my security. Um, and it's like, well, I mean, I'm not the first person to, dream of flying in the stars.
He nods and says, "Is there something you hope to find out there that you can't find here?"
No, just kind of want to do it.
He'll nod and looks over to Kale and says, "What about you? I understand that you haven't been able to find reputable employment."
yeah, yeah. I guess that's. He's just like called the fuck out. He's like, that's true. I have not. And I admit I have often wondered what it would be like to be free of the environment I'm in.
He nods and says, "You have been testified as by many people as being a rather accomplished pugilist, among other uh, acts of physical aggression, but somewhat uh, mild-mannered despite it. Is it possible you don't really like the lot you're in?"
I don't. I really don't. I don't like it.
He nods a little bit and turns back toward the screen, as though contemplating. "I have a story to tell the four of you, and I have to decide at this moment whether or not that story is going to be relayed or to send you back down the elevator. I don't have a whole lot I can do to precurse the story, short of just turning and asking. Do you want to hear something that may change your world forever?"
Yes.
Yes.
Uh, he, uh, he smiles and says, "I suspected as much." He hits a few buttons on the screen, and the projected route changes. Rather than deviating it off into space the way it was supposed to, it deviates off another direction, toward Europa, does a loop around it, and heads back inward again. And he points to right back where it does the loop around Europa and says, "50 years ago, right here, we made contact with a TTI Luminor. You probably don't know that word very much, so I'll let you in onto it. TTI is a corporation back in the Sol system that has a great deal of influence over some rather impressive technology that we don't necessarily equate with traditional methods like electricity or physics. It's a little bit more esoteric. They also have a great deal of bioscience that we don't have with us now. Now, our company, of course, knew about them, as they were very big names at the time. We didn't have anything specific to do with them, but as we came around Europa, they made direct contact and explained about something out here. And he points toward a zoomed out view of the map showing the Oort cloud, which is about 10 to 20 light years away. This area of space is someplace that we would have to travel to on our initial route, and TTI provided rather suitable proof that we would never survive the journey. Unfortunately, I don't really have that proof anymore. We'll get to that later. But it was sufficient to abort the mission. The tricky part about that was that the mission was everything. It was the entirety of Exodus's contract. It was all of their money. They were going to do it anyway. So it was either pilot off into some place where we had sufficient suspicion to believe we'd never survive to, or find an alternative. And he shows the ship coming around the back and points to a midpoint line again. Right here is when we were contacted by Marsco specifically. As the ship was coming back undetected on a coasting route, Marsco proposed to buy the company. They wanted a closet research division that nobody had any eyes on because nobody was thinking to look for it. They wanted to deposit the ship someplace where it could use its assets to do R&D without it ever being scrutinized by anybody else. They wanted us to go here. And he points to an area that's kind of on the inward spin between Earth and Mercury. Says this is what's called the Shambles. It's a ship graveyard, so to speak, where a lot of things come together, either because they're fired off in that direction, or because smugglers have dropped them, or it's been considered a tomb or a gold mine for various people. There are thousands of ships in it. It's a very good place to hide if you don't want to be seen. It's also a very dangerous location. It was Marsco's intent that we take up base over here and proceed to serve as a staging place for a research division that had not been revealed to the public, so that they could push operations on a piece of technology that they didn't want people to know about. He lets the video play through, and the ship actually arrives at its destination. And he says the Exodus Prime docked at the Shambles approximately 50 years ago, or 48 years ago. It's been sitting here ever since. And as he finishes that up, the roof above your head kind of opens up, and it's this picture window, the first that you've ever seen in the ship. And outside, the place is just cluttered with things. You can see space for the first time, but there's a brilliant sun coming through it. And just ship after ship after scrambled ship, enormous sizes, even bigger than the one that you're in, or much smaller. Your ship is already pretty enormous. So as you're looking down the whole size, you really get an idea for how big the damn thing is from the sides. But there are small ones, big ones, some as big as your head, and all sorts of different crisscrossing and interlocking scaffolding, and this floating menagerie of just steel and alloy floating out there. You are very clearly not in deep space.
So we're not going to another planet?
He shakes his head and says that became very unlikely within our first year of the voyage. He points to a window, and you now have an exterior view of the ship showing up on smart glass, which is not a thing that you really see that often except for renders. But it pans around, and the whole back section of the ship, the drive section, is open and looks like it's been set up as a kind of staging area for a whole lot of different pieces of equipment. And you make a couple observations as you're looking at it, depending on what you roll here. Go ahead and do a body perceive difficulty 2.
Okay.
Everybody who's watching the thing, so that's everybody.
Okay, cool. I was
I
just
can
about to ask that
actually-
actually.
Just do this. What the hell just happened?
My God, that's an impressive roll.
How did what?
D28. That's what you did. D28.
Yeah, you rolled a d28 instead of 2d8.
Which, in fairness, you rolled very well on it.
Seems that way. Here's the thing. What I actually did was I hit last roll.
That's a 10 for me, by the way. I have +3.
So Kira and Kale see the platform. Were there D9s rolled earlier? There was a 2D9 rolled earlier. I gotta watch you people like hawks.
That was for my mutations because
Oh.
there's not 9 options.
There shouldn't be a roll a D9 option. D9s don't exist. Is it D8 plus
Yes.
1?
No, it's a random number generator. It can roll any dice you want.
Well, yeah, but I didn't write the rules with the intention of people using digital tools.
Okay, but it says roll for it, and there are 9 options.
Oh, okay. Sorry. I was like, what mutation gives you a D9?
No, sorry.
Yeah.
Sorry.
What? That's not right. There's a typo in there somewhere.
Yeah, so for some reason, oh wow. So earlier I accidentally did just roll a d28 plus 2 and somehow only got a 16.
Nice.
So I thought it was right.
Uh-huh.
So when I hit last roll, it did it again, but this time it was apparent that I had.
Nice.
So that's fantastic.
Very
Anyways,
nice.
I got a 14.
Okay. So you see, the rest of you see this building platform. It's a very, very large structure that's inside of it. There are also very angry-looking kind of drones around it. Not very many, maybe 2. In fact, one of them is probably the one that you're looking through. There's a platform in there. Something's being worked on to it. There are some machines that are taking place down there, and there's an active screen on there that you can see kind of a distortion effect going on, clearly attempting to hide what's going on down there. Doesn't seem to be working very well against this camera, but that could be because this camera is designed to see through it since it belongs to the ship. You're not really sure how that looks from the outside. AIM, because you sparred a little earlier, you noticed something a little more interesting, if it wasn't interesting enough already. There's damage. Damage that seems like it's less from things just kind of blowing up and more like things trying to attack it. It looks as though this particular platform, and in fact your ship, has endured more than one assault.
Um, I will point at that and be like, what's that?
He nods and says, "The reason you're here." And he brings up another image.
I didn't do that.
uh, he shakes his head and narrows his eyes and says, "I should hope not." Although some of your people used to, he says over to Tygon's character, which is a bit of a dig, but he also kind of has a smile on his face, like he's just kind of rubbing you at it a little bit. And says, looks over to the rest of you and says, "I'll explain what Kakira's role in all this is soon." He brings up another image of 5 individuals.
I lean over to Kale and I'm just like, your people. She is an alien.
Kale's gonna shake his head like, I don't know.
It does all feel pretty alien to you right now. You were never expected to see a star system before. So you are looking out there at things made by a people you didn't think you'd ever encounter. There are other ships around made by other vectors who are your folk, supposedly, but like that was not folk you were really expecting to encounter. You were always taught that essentially the universe as you know it exists within this ship. But he brings up this other portrait of five rather stalwart-looking individuals dressed in uniforms. Nice, bulky-looking flight jackets and grins and whatnot. Uh, and says, "This team of individuals was tasked with defending the ship from outside interference and marauders. The area that we're in is particularly dangerous. That's one of the reasons why we're able to keep people away from it so well. But in order to fulfill MarsCo's mandate, we require materials and equipment that we did not actually travel with, and they can't provide it to us lest it be tracked. The whole idea is that we are a research division that doesn't exist. Even their employees get here by means of rather extraordinary diversionary tactics. We've had scientists shot by torpedo halfway across the solar system just to arrive at our doorstep."
Oh, jeez.
Yeah, he nods and says they were very eager to get to the bathroom. And as he's kind of looking around and says, this platoon was extremely good at what they did. However, they recently came into contact with a threat that was more than they could handle. As you're looking at them, you see several different quirks that you're beginning to notice. There's a cog, there's a lion, a canine, a hemi is in there, and uh, whatever we want the fifth one to be. I guess we'll just pick something. Maybe a bird. Didn't have a bird. Not. That we're going through it. Seems almost. Oh no, sorry, that was the fifth one. The fifth one was the Exonef. Okay, so there was the four there and the Exonef, which you notice looks very familiar to the person sitting next to you. In fact, you're noticing several parallels now, as you have another cog, another canine, and or not a canine rather, whatever a possum is. We're calling him a canine.
Marsupial.
Oh no, that's a dog.
I'm built off of rodent.
Okay. Yes, you're not a direct parallel to anything that's up there, but you do have another cog here, and again, there doesn't seem there's another XNF here. You're beginning to get the idea of there might be a attempt here to replace something missing. They said they recently encountered something they were unable to fend off. We don't have a whole lot of information about what it was, but unfortunately, we lost the entire team. This is a team that's replaced every 10 to 15 years or so. We depend on them very heavily. And we are currently we usually depend on the previous group to educate the ones coming in. Unfortunately, this time we are without any previous group. We lost the entire team at once. So you are going into this blind should you choose to accept the job. Essentially, we need a new team. We need a group that will take up the mantle and become our agents outside that help us find new equipment, help us salvage old equipment, bring in new scientists, send out old ones, and keep us safe from the forces of the Shambles.
I would like very much to do that. I just gotta actually kind of put my hand up,
Like you're volunteering, or like you have a question?
like I have a question.
Oh, okay. He nods toward you.
Like, why keep everybody in the dark about the mission?
He nods grimly and says, "It is an unfortunate system of events, but as you know, wanderlust is certainly a thing, and there are elements of uh, somewhat villainy within our own walls. Um, the the deal that we had in Marsco, which resulted both in the substantial purchase of this vessel and in taking care of many families back home, as well as all the resources required to basically cover what we lost in this deal to begin with, was such that there be absolutely no security leak. Now, you, as people who want to get off the ship, went through rather extraordinary lengths to find ways out of it. You're building your own spacecraft. If it turned out that all you really had to do was go out an airlock, it would be rather difficult to stop you, especially if hundreds of you wanted to do it at once. This is, for all intents and purposes, a hostage situation. Now, we like to keep our hostages very well fed, well happy, and they did volunteer to be stuck here their entire lives, so at the moment, no harm, no foul is the rule of the game. But the moment they find out they actually do have the ability to leave and conceivably even set foot on a planet again, it's going to be much more difficult to keep them inside.
Like, well, I mean, I want to get out there, yeah, but I want to come back. I don't.
He nods and says, "You will, and you will have to keep your secrets as the previous group did, as they lived among us too. But you will also have the opportunity that your brethren do not have. You may, in fact, need to make the trek back to Mars, or even other worlds.
Hmm.
You will get to stand on a planet again." And he smiles and says, "It's something that I don't even get to do."
I'm gonna put my hand up again.
You never took it down.
I took it down when he called on.
Yeah.
Like, I've never been on a planet before.
Uh, uh, he nods. I mean, I don't know if he says. Well, I mean, I guess he does say again. It's a figure of speech. We're supposed to be on a planet. He nods and says, "Well, there's a first time for everything." Um, and looks over to Kale and says, "What do you think?"
I absolutely want to do this.
He nods and says, "There's going to be a lot of requirements as far as learning new skills and making sure that you're able to hold your tongue. You have a lot of attachments to people who are going to want to know where you are. We can probably help sever those attachments, but if we had the ability to control everything going on down there, we would have done it by now."
I
Oh,
can make it work. I'll figure out something.
He nods and says, he nods and kind of gives you a look and says, "I believe that you can, but what you're joining is a fraternity of very high standard." And as he kind of looks back at the group behind him that was standing there, they look like good folks. They're like kind of strong heroic types. It's sort of the Avengers sort of assembled in the back there. And it goes, "Joining this means that you are severing the current uh, uh, unlawful behavior you currently have. Somehow you're going to have to find a way to do that without giving away what your new mission is."
Can you fake me death records?
He shakes his head and says, "Unfortunately not. It's going to be necessary for you to be able
Damn.
to go back and forth throughout the populace, both because you live here and because we need you to travel places inside the ship.
Okay.
But you do have a new team of individuals here who might have ideas for you."
All right. I'll pick their brains after the meeting.
Speaking of brains, and he looks over to Kakira and says, "Kakira here is a representative of our first and most important allied group in the Shambles. So when we landed here, within about the first 2 years of our occupation, we were besieged by a species that calls itself exonyms. And our captain, the person that holds all of our codes and the emergency procedures for the entire ship, was attacked, captured, and essentially consumed. It seems that these exonymphs have the ability to absorb thoughts and memories from the people they consume. It's somewhat more specific consumption than that, but I'll spare you the details. Suffice it to say, the exonymph that consumed the captain got the captain's thoughts, as well as this mission and all the things involved. And they proceeded to work out a deal with the crew in order to make the contract continue. It's very much a you scratch my back, we'll scratch yours situation. There's a colony here of Exodus that is doing rather well. They are often besieged by the locals too. They want additional protection. So in return for providing protection to them, they are serving as a living memory for us, because a lot of the things that we have uh, don't necessarily get kept on the internal drive, specifically in case we get hacked from within by our own populace. There are separations here. They serve both as a literal black box on the team and as guides to the local uh, shambles where we can't get to because we just don't have people walking around. So the Exodus are your allies in that you are to defend them when asked to, and that one of them is to accompany you on your team. Our first task, hopefully, is to retrieve the bodies of your fallen previous team and, if at all possible, the Exodus that was with them so that his brain can be absorbed as well. And maybe we can find out what they faced out there. However, it has been some time now, and as I understand it, if it's not fresh, it doesn't work very well.
Hmm. Okay.
Yeah, unfortunately.
So, Kakira, you are aware of most of the things that have been mentioned here. You were briefed from your end, which there is a colony here. This has been a pretty successful arrangement so far. The people that were originally sent on this mission were all pretty level-headed folks. They were colonists and crusaders, and they had been substantially convinced by TTI that their mission just wasn't going to function. So they were looking for some way to salvage it. And when this came around and the initial Exodus said, "Oh wait, no shit, I didn't mean to eat your captain. Hang on, we can do something." They actually heard them out. And since then, it has been a fairly successful partnership, wherein there are colonies that you can use as safe zones to kind of hang out in, and it is a bit of a boon to be allowed to join this team. This is your first time actually setting foot on the ship itself.
Okay.
But it's something that you've seen off through windows growing up and things like that. And he says, "So, do we have a deal?
A deal?
An arrangement, an accord? Are you interested?"
Oh
Yes.
yes.
He smiles and said, "All right, then without further ado," and we'll bring out, step behind him and open up a closet, and pull out a series of uniforms, and kind of push them out toward your directions. It says, "These are your uniforms. Your sidearms will be issued to you by the armory, and I'd like to come show you your shuttles." And he smiles at saying it as like that's a thing that they always get excited about hearing.
Our own shuttles?
He nods and says the best, and personally altered by every previous member of the team.
That sounds wonderful.
On the badges, it says your names on them, like you actually put them there ahead of time. And then there's an icon. It just says Starlight Crusade at the bottom,
Yes, perfect.
or
Ah.
Brigade at the bottom.
Aim is I'm going to aim is like vibrating with excitement.
And also multiple 80s colors, as that is the motif of the Starlight Brigade. The ships that show up on the screen behind him are all very personal, very different colored craft. So it's like a big cockpit and sick ass wings and various engine pods that are probably more than is necessary.
Awesome.
And surely each of them will have a separately colored contrail.
Yes.
Perfect.
Makes sense.
And in light of the fact that I'm sick and my throat is beginning to hurt, I think we'll hold it there. But that'll be
Okay.
that's where we're gonna start our
That
thing.
is very fair.
I am very into this.
Yeah, I'm really excited.
Sweet.
I concur.
Are we going to begin with our own theme song next week?
If I had anything that could compete, then maybe. But in the meantime, I mean, just listen to Twerp and you'll be good.
Perfect.
That's what I meant. Oh, that's why you said it was going to fit the aesthetic.
Yeah, it all comes
Yeah,
around.
it does.
That's why your ship needs to have like, uh, opal chromed hull that just like shines off in a billion different colors.
Oh, that's why there was a cog and a
A
lion.
cog and a
Yeah.
lion and
I get it. Ah, yeah.
they're
It
all
makes sense.
dead.
And long.
Aw.
And
And-
Lord Phobos is the exonymph, I assume, because
And-
his
and-
helmet looks kind of bug-like.
the Hemi,
Yeah.
Yep. And for some reason, he has a mustache now, and it looks terrible.
I mean, he looks amazing. I don't know what you're talking about, but
I mean, fair.
the most laughable part of that video is, oh, look at this random person that comes into space. We're your team. What up, drummer? Quick, join the crusade. Like, do we have any relation to each other whatsoever? Well, we're all in space.
You seem trustworthy.
Hey, you got your ship working. That means you're one of us.
Hey, you shoved your hand into an enemy ship, then it transformed. All right, you seem good.
It was transformed by the purity of the light in your heart.
Yep. Or the light on your jacket, whichever. It's a gorgeous video.
Hey, all I can say is it's a good thing that this job was offered, because halfway between the light and gray, no place for a life to waste away.
It's true.
So I'll take the road with all the stay eggs. Those are lyrics to Starlight Brigade, by the way.
They are.
So, yes.
And there's like the little thing in the background going, Starlight Brigade. All right, cool.
I think that is Dr. Sung with his weird thing that he puts in his mouth to make him sound all robot-y.
Melodica.
No, it's not a melodica. Melodica is the thing you put in your mouth and you blow into it and you play a little keyboard.
I assumed it was just auto-tuned.
No, he does it like in real time. He puts a thing in his mouth and changes the tone on his keyboard
Oh, cool.
as he sings it. It's wild.
Neat.
It's I think it's based off the technology that the Peter Frampton used to use.
Hmm.
I wanna thank you.
Wait, ecstasy?
Yes.
Psychotropics? Yeah.
Sure. Sure, why not?
Seth,
Huh?
I have one request.
Huh?
Can you give me a character sheet in the Roll20?
Oh, did you not have one? I don't know how well it will work with the Nexonev, but give it a shot. Character. Click. Click. Save. Okie dokie. Alright. Thanks, y'alls, for coming. I'll catch you next week.
No problem. See you next week, everybody.
Ta-ta.
Later.